security. Elad, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let the people know.
Sure thing. Thank you very much, James. Thanks for having me here. I'm Elad Schulman. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Lasso Security. I've been in the software space for about 25 years now. Always on the vendor side, always around monitoring and security, always working with enterprises. Started actually in the early 2000s as a software developer in a company called Mercury Interactive. So have some technical background. Relatively fast, I moved to manage development teams and then to product management, where I spent a big chunk of my career is around product management. And after a few years at Mercury, we got acquired by HP Software, and this is something that happened quite a few times in my career. So got acquired by the enterprise. Spent there a few years, was very close to innovation and working with startups and M&As. But after a few years, I realized that startup blood runs through my veins. So I wanted to go back to the startup world and joined a startup called Optier, which was doing transaction instrumentation back before New Relic, Dynatrace were who they are. I started in product management and I grew to manage all of the local site, all of R&D and product management. And after a few years, we got acquired by SAP, a different type of corporate. Spent there a lot around the security center and the innovation center. And after a few years, fast forward 2017, I left. I founded and I was the CEO of a startup called SegaSec, doing brand protection anti-phishing, which was a quite successful and fast journey. At the end of 2019, we got acquired by Mimecast. Got in there, COVID hit towards the end of 2020. I left. And then I moved to the dark side of the world. So started doing a lot of investment as an angel with a syndicate of investors, working with all sorts of funds, and thought about making this a profession. We can spend a completely different session on that. And in 2022, I got fascinated with Gen AI, like a lot of other people, and I thought that cybersecurity is going to be a completely different ballgame there. So I teamed up with a group of former employees of mine from SegaSec that they were running an LLM operations venture, and I was their first check. I was their first investor. And I slowly convinced them, stop what you're doing and go and let's do security together. And early last year, we founded Lasso Security exactly to tackle this world. So we're a bit over a year in this crazy and fascinated journey.
Yeah, I think that was the first question I was going to ask you was around how you've been in such a rare number of startups across, like it's rare to go from brand protection to application security, like Dynatrace level of nerdiness on it and everything in between, and then to work both for startups and giant enterprises and see such a landscape of the challenges. What was it about like early Gen AI that made you think the security thing here is worth getting into very deeply as opposed to every other sort of the trendy thing to get into?
So as I mentioned, my background is in product and technical. So I usually, and I'm driven by problems. So I started working with this and, you know, with my own hands, I started seeing, you know, how the existing products going to address it. It's completely different. It's conversational, it's situational, it's more unstructured than before. How are the existing solutions going to solve that? And immediately I thought it's going to be a big problem. And, you know, for me, you know, being semi-retired, I said, you know, what would drive me into the court again is a big problem. And I thought that this has a potential to be a huge problem, even back then, before people thought that it's going to be a problem. And I said, it's going to be very challenging, very interesting. And, you know, it was before it got hyped. So I said, it's going to be a problem. And I like big problems. I like challenges. I said, I want to be part of the team, the group of organizations that are going to try and bring a solution to this world. And it's usually what I tell people. So there are a lot of different things about why you want to a startup or a company, but having a problem is the basis of many things. Is what you want to address, and here it was foreseeing that it's going to be a problem, because usually you're getting into something which is already problematic, something that many people are experiencing. I anticipated that this is going to be a big problem. There are other things which drove me to that, but it was first and foremost, it is going to be a big problem.
Yeah, when you say that, what specifically comes to mind? Because to me, that's been the challenge, is thinking of actual attacks against LLMs, or what are the kinds of risks that we're actually trying to protect against when it comes to
Sure.
this stuff?
So I think it started with two main things which are still relevant today, but those are use cases out of several use cases of many. The first one is around everyone's talking about data leak. So you can lose sensitive data there, but in a shape that, unlike before, it's not that it's just unstructured data, structured data. It's unstructured, but in a way that you're communicating with back then it was the chat application, and you're seeing that it understands the context, it understands the flow. Suddenly, instead of and this is the very basic example that I give people. If you're writing a credit card number in digits, it's very, very easy to understand it. But what's happening if you're writing it in a series of words, separated by spaces or hyphens or whatever? It's something that the model understands. They can't translate it into something which is meaningful, but the existing solutions really can't. And it goes to languages and really understanding that it behaves differently. Second is the same way that you can lose data, you suddenly can get exposed to data that, it got trained on the internet. Who knows, what's out there? And, you're very concerned about, all sorts of emails that you're getting or links and, getting back to my phishing and brand protection part. But you're getting pieces of information that, how can you trust them? And this is before we're getting to talk about the hallucinations and the more that we know about this world. And even, and shortly afterwards, you're starting to get into, again, it's a use case. It's the fact that you can manipulate the model and make it to spit out things that they shouldn't. And, we're talking about the prompt injections and jailbreaks. And it started maturing back then. But what I realized is that those are just use cases. Those are just examples. And one of the things that I'm mostly concerned about, and definitely as we're going forward, is what is it that we don't know? And this world is running so fast and changing so fast that there are new cases, and the attackers are also arming their ways with Gen AI tools. What don't we know? And this is what I'm always concerned about, the unknown unknowns, not the things that I know that I don't know. There are things that I don't know that I don't know. How can we react to that? And the more it progressed, we saw more and more use cases and more examples. And we can definitely talk, and we might talk about, the OWASP Top 10 and things like that. But it is evolving in paces that we've never seen before. But it started with that. Those are still very much concern for people. And we'll talk about, data leak and how it evolved. But, I could see it working with the tools. And, I didn't mention it in my background, but I'm a mathematician and a hacker from the ages of 4 or 5, and working with it and always trying to manipulate things. And there's just something that we're going to publish in a few days. All the time that we're discovering something new, I want to play with it with my own hands again. And getting and sorry for jumping into that world. Being a hacker in the world of Gen AI. It's a combination of being a philosopher and a troll. It's not the hacker of all times.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think what's what's been interesting to me about Lasso is how you've addressed. I think there's a great product lesson in this as far as like addressing the market as it has the need. Because it's evolving so fast. I mean, I made a video about the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, and it was like immediately obsolete because like the Rev 2 came out like a week later. And so like I think it gets to that pace of the evolution of this stuff. And so how do you try to like work with customers? What's that experience been like, just trying to help? Are the problems mostly like compliance problems? Is it like nerdy attacker problems? Is it like a mix of the two? Is it governance? Like, what are the main threads that you're seeing?
Sure. So let's divide it into a few parts, and then we'll unpack them. First of all, it starts with companies that are concerned mostly about governance and control and things around that. And this is definitely a problem. And we'll talk a little bit about compliance in that matter as well. Second, there are people that are concerned about, developing the applications and training the models, how to make them work. And there are the ones which are concerned, and by the way, this is where we're mostly concerned about, is what's happening once people are actually going to use these technologies, and how can you prevent from something hazardous happening to the organization. And there are different people that are involved in each direction, and it still seems that, customers are very much exploring that. And within that, let's also divide it into two types of usage. So there are the challenges of your employees, which are using the Gen AI tools, the chatbots, the code assistants, and this is relevant for every type of organization out there. Everyone is using it, unless you've blocked access to this, which you can't really do for the long run because it's blocking progress. So at best, they're giving a policy and giving some warnings, but there are the employees that are using it. On the other hand, there are the companies that their boards, their executives teams gave them a directive: go and build things based on Gen AI, find the use cases, and give us the competitive advantage, give us the flexibility, give us the productivity. And the more and more we see organizations going there, definitely we see the larger organizations putting a lot of resources there, but still they're figuring out the business use cases. How does it fit? Is it plainly for customer support, for marketing, for claim management, for enterprise search? There are all sorts of use cases. And from what we see, the smaller organizations are more concerned about their employees because they're not fully versed on working with the models. Larger organizations are very much concerned about what's happening once you're working with the models, but they're still concerned about their employees, but as a secondary concern. And there are different people there. There are people from corporate and IT and SecOps versus application and product security. And there are a lot of people involved in the task forces around Gen AI adoption. So it is security, it is technology, definitely legal and compliance, and the more regulated industries, the financials, the healthcares are concerned about the EU AI Act in Europe and the executive order in the US, and other geographies have them. And they're very much working on which controls do we need to put in place, which policies do we need to enforce. And it is still growing, but we do see faster adoption, acceleration. If at the beginning of the year, organizations almost didn't have any secured budget for talking about security and privacy around that, we're in the middle of the year. Many organizations have, either a secured budget or emergency budget, some sort, and are figuring it out. What is the line item for next year? When in the beginning of the year, we didn't have a line item for that. So it varies. And on top of that, I'll say, and I think that this is something that we also discussed a while ago, the product and the technical teams are concerned about how can we adopt this and make it work and make the functionality work, but security is dragged behind. And as this is running fast, it's not a question of, I'll have 1 or 2 years to add security layers on top of that. It's happening maybe tomorrow, and things are hitting to production without the approval of security and without the right controls. And as we're saying, as the attackers will figure that out and start striking, we'll start seeing very interesting things. And it's more than the anecdotes that we see out there of getting, a Chevy for $1 or embarrassing the chatbot. These are nice. And maybe they cause some concern for the brand, but suddenly once people will start really exposing the crown jewels of organizations, this is where it's going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, to me, that from the And even my gut response to this tells you a lot, because I'm always very interested in like the application layer stuff that's going on. But I even want to back up from that, because I'm sure that's where I'll want to talk about the most, is specifically around how many different teams have different goals when it comes to this technology. Because even when you were talking about the compliance issue, it never occurred to me, like, how does right to be forgotten apply to if you're using someone's model in an LLM, like or using someone's data in an LLM. That those sorts of questions are real questions that are going to create policies that then we have to figure out what to deal with. And that's like part of the governance concern. And I've seen whole products created around just trying to help, like, here's policies basically for dealing with this. And then the SecOps use case of like the data, the structured versus unstructured nature of the data, and how since it's unstructured, it's a lot harder to enforce basic DLP sort of protections around what data is going where, and is it sensitive or not, and how are we tracking it. And then that application layer side, are you seeing in organizations like these three use cases getting adopted all at once, or are you getting reached out to by like distinct teams that are looking to solve just their problem?
So it's definitely the first one. So it is all over the place. And even if we're starting with one use case, for example, the employees, because there are a lot of people that are involved in the task force, and they realize that, we have capabilities that can address other use cases, it's very fast escalating to look across. And, the larger organizations definitely have all of them. They have the employees using chatbots. They have the developers using code assistants. They have all sorts of third-party applications that have LLM in the backend that they don't know about. And they're also adopting, the various Gen AI models, whether it is Azure OpenAI or Bedrock or on Bedrock or on others. And it is spanning multiple groups. This is part of the challenges, because everyone wants a piece of the action, and everyone is concerned about that. And this is something that we need to manage. And I even on that, I'll give you another example. We have a very large organization that we started working with. And in the first few weeks of the POC, when it was very dense and small, suddenly the champion told me, listen, there are all sorts of business stakeholders that want to see if their use case can be addressed. They call them the BISOs, the Business Information Security Officers. So we got on a call with them, and I said, okay, let's figure it out. Let's help them with what they need, and let's move on. More than 80 people, 80 business stakeholders got on the call, each one with a different use case that they want to address. And they're very much concerned about that. And I told my champion, listen, I want to address all of them, but if we want to succeed, we need to build a plan to gradually address them. You need to be focused. I want to, really, and for me, it would be a huge deal, but let's aim for success. Let's set the framework to help everyone. And, as we're talking also about working with RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, and connecting all sorts of different data sources and systems, and we're getting to RAG security, the business use cases become very, very much interesting, because suddenly people can get exposed to data that on a normal day they shouldn't. They're asking a question and they're getting an answer on data that, if we're talking about the old identity and access management concept, their role was not allowed to access this data. But now when you're connecting it, suddenly they're asking, and this is just a plain example, what is the salary of X? And they're getting an answer. And this is something that, cannot happen. And those are part of the more business related challenges, but it's really, it's all over the place. And we are being dragged. And by the way, for us, this was also the understanding that we cannot be a pinpoint solution for a specific use case. The organization will need a broad platform to address really various use cases, because, if we're talking about security, the average organization has, 75, 80 different security products. If we're talking about generative AI security, they don't want an additional 20 for those. And just with the ones that we talked about, the governance, the training, the runtime. It's already different disciplines. So you can't have infinite number of solutions for that. You need to consolidate. And for us, we already said we need to bring this consolidation within the platform because things are intertwined, especially in the domain of usage that we're looking on right now. But even in other places, we can't have pinpoint solutions for a specific model, a specific technology, or a specific problem. It will not be adopted by the market.
Yeah, I think like what always comes to mind to me is like supporting Hugging Face as the delineation of like adoption of that in production applications is very low, but you have to be able to support it because if they are using it, it's probably the biggest security risk that exists.
Correct.
And so it's those types of little flexibility things that really drive it. And then on the RAG example, to me, when I first was looking at AI security, I didn't think from an application side that the opportunities were huge, because if you're just opening a chat session to Chat GPT, like there's not a lot of risk with that. Exactly. But the second that you add RAG to the equation, now you've gone from zero risk to like massive risk, especially if you start allowing it to do actions on the user's behalf into any data source. Like that's nuts. So I'm wondering what you see as far as adoption of these things in enterprises, where a lot of the early like investors saying, what are you doing for AI? And the CEO goes, product manager, what are we doing for AI? And then that turns into a budget now for an ML team to make something. And that something was usually a chat bot. But then how are you seeing those things evolve now in enterprise use cases to where are they experimenting with RAG? Is it more an agent-based approach? Are they giving up and saying like, all right, well, that was fun for the month. Like, let's move on to the next thing. And that chat will always exist. But yeah, where are you seeing people move with their implementations, experimenting with it?
So definitely RAG is here and it is expanding, and it's more than experiments. It is more than the chat interfaces for the customers. It is around things like enterprise search internally for the employees. It is around improvement of existing processes, like we see a lot of. I'll give you an example around claim management. So a company that, they had an analyst that, collected a lot of different pieces of data, and it took on average 8 hours to prepare the claim. And now with Gen AI, they collected all the information automatically, and now it generated a report, and now an analyst needs to spend 30 minutes to approve it. Going forward, they're also looking to completely eliminate the human in the loop and take actions on top of that. So it is there. They're figuring out the use cases. They're adding more and more. And as I told you, the 84 business use cases, this is based on RAG. Agents, less, but this is definitely where, if once people will get to trust it more and more, and they'll reduce the 30 minutes to 0 and will allow an agent to take an autonomous action, I think that it's close to getting into broader adoption. And this is where I completely agree with you. This is where the huge risk will be. A small mistake in the main, not just mistake, a small mistake or a small intervention. So if we're sticking to the prompt injections, one small change in instructions and someone will take an autonomous action based on that could be catastrophic. And this is where we're seeing that that's going. And it is not, a few years into the future. I think that we're already starting to start seeing very interesting use cases this year, definitely in 2025. And the more it gets evolved, the more the models and the architectures become standardized, the more it would be easy for mass adoption and for the small organization, especially cost-wise, and with total cost of ownership-wise. And it's here.
Yeah, and then technically, when you start getting into things like preventing prompt injection, I feel like I've seen that's always in marketing material that comes across as a checkbox, but there's like a million ways to try to do that. what are you experimenting with and using just as an example of your approach? Does the flexibility thing carry over in here where you want to be able to support like an SDK, a reverse proxy, something to monitor the connections? Like, do you want to build to support all of that? Or is there something that you think is like, this is the way that we should prevent LLM application layer attacks?
So specifically on that, I'll start with one anecdote. Everyone wants support for prompt injection and jailbreak. By the way, not a lot of people know the difference between them, and there are subtleties there. But still, I'm asking the customers, okay, let's assume that we solve it. Two questions. One, have you seen run in real life? Not a lot have seen. And second, do you have the data to test it? Because we have one of the larger data sets in the world to test it. By the way, others have it, so it's a lot of them are being reused and it's getting updated all the time. So the question is, do you, Mr. Customer, do you have the ability to test it? So this is very interesting. And from our perspective, we are looking mostly, it's not only, but mostly into the LLMs as a black box, and we're saying there is an element of behavior there. So you're interacting with it, and there are anomalies. Where are there anomalies? There are anomalies in the prompt, and there are anomalies in the completion. We need to monitor those wherever those are. So with a reverse proxy, with an SDK, with a browser extension, with an IDE plugin, wherever that is, it's interception of the data, but then it is applying the different concepts that we have. First of all, we have different models that we're updating, we're fine-tuning to address that. And I will never say that I have 100% capability to address it. It's not relevant. Every day we have a new example, so we need to constantly update what we are doing. And second, and this gets a bit into security, and this I'll give an example of why this is different. A lot of people think of it from a data science perspective. So I want the largest data set. I want another example, and I would be able to address every question, every prompt that the attacker is writing. But the basic concept of security is that, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So if someone is trying to do a jailbreak or a prompt injection more than once, you need to isolate that session. You need to start blocking it. You can't allow that session to continue again and again and again. You need to cut it, and this is part of the ways to address that, because you're changing it a bit and you're relying on what are the replies that you're getting from the model, and you're learning as an attacker, where are the vulnerabilities? No, stop the session, eliminate it, let the attacker start from scratch, and game on. So these are part of the things, and it's getting into what is an anomaly in the request, or is someone asking a question that they shouldn't, and this is the data set, but is the response something that we expect to get? Whether it is different instructions or different sets of data or a behavior which is unexpected. So these are the things that we're looking. This is the concept that we found so far that's working. And again, things may change. We are looking into other alternatives, and constantly, security is kind of like an onion. It's layers. You're putting another mechanism, another one, and eventually you need to reduce the attack surface. Same way here. And this is why, and there are, all the time the models are changing. So if I found a solution that, again, for GPT-4, maybe the same solution would not be relevant for GPT-4o. So it's also constant evaluation, constant testing of everything that you've done. And again, trying to isolate the problem from different areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example in terms of the second that OpenAI allows you to prompt via like camera, video, audio, like if you've built your entire product around only text-based filtering, all of a sudden you like can't support detecting employees taking pictures of documents and sending them somewhere or whatever.
Exactly.
And that's on the application side. It's super interesting to me because I think this has been one of the black box sort of areas that teams are really behind on, just application security in general at the application layer. Because a lot of companies still might only have a WAF that's doing some basic detection and filtering, which is going to not have like a Gen AI detection package for a long time, if ever. And to your point, it wouldn't fully catch the inputs and outputs and do the anomaly detection. There's a whole evolution of this. It seems like what you're saying from a detection side, that's very much in line with like how API security evolved as a category, where it's some people think it's a WAF, some people like either way, it needs to be like a specialized thing that's detecting
Exactly
what's happening. So yeah, that's all super interesting. Is there anything else that we should make sure that we cover around what you're seeing with Gen AI and risk, or like things that people are ignoring as we come up on the end here?
I think that in general, people need to ask themselves several questions. And first of all is, do I know what's happening in my organization around Gen AI? First of all, do you know? Once you ask that question, the second is, who is using it? What do you know about that usage? What data is being passed there? And then you can start, and this is just plain understanding. Some of it relates to, even to business understanding of how this is being used. But after that, after you know what's happening, just identify what is the risk that you really have. Is it small? Is it large? And in that comes also, we talked very briefly about that, the different regulations and policies. Do I need to put specific tools and restrictions in place to be able to comply with the updates that are coming to the regulations? And then ask yourself, do I have the right tools to identify if something problematic is happening? And it is okay that I think that it's not happening. It is okay to say, listen, I have these tools that can address the use case. Go ahead, test them. Make sure that they can identify the data leaks, the prompt engineering, whatever you identify as the risk, test that you have that. And then ask yourself, can you really react in a way that would enable these technologies to work? Because blocking is very easy, but eventually you're causing frustration, and user experience and security are always colliding. How do you make sure that you're part of this revolution? If you're able to address all of that, afterwards, it's tools, it's practices, it's people, and there are all sorts of, there's us and there are a lot of other companies that are going to address that. The big companies are getting there. There are solutions to address that, but just getting to an understanding of what is actually happening. And I think that people are already asking that, and they're getting more and more. So we don't need to educate people too much, maybe about how severe the problems can be, because people are starting to say, I didn't think that this could happen. But they know that this is something new, that they know that there's a risk, they know they need to address it. So I think I would wrap with that. And again, we've already talked for, almost 40 minutes, and we could talk for hours. So I hope that we got the glimpse of what's interesting for people to get out of this session.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Where should people go to follow you and Lasso? What are good ways to connect?
So Lasso Security, lasso.security is a website, over LinkedIn, over our Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me over LinkedIn or Twitter. We're trying to be very responsive. We have a lot of content that we're publishing. And if you see people with a cowboy hat, feel free to reach out and interact. We're very happy to share. For the people here that are coming to Black Hat in Vegas in about less than a month, we have a booth there. I'm speaking there. Feel free to reach out. We'd be very happy to chat with you.
Yes, I have myself found Lasso Security many times just by the hat. So it's a great conference opportunity. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was great.
My pleasure.
Hope to see everybody back.
Thank you.